Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's session, Unlocking Smart City Potential with Government Fleets, here at Smart Cities Connect, a seminal event on the Smart Cities calendar. And we here at Rubicon are so proud to be a part of it yet again. My name is Michael Allegretti. I'm Chief Strategy Officer for Rubicon, a software company that provides smart waste and recycling solutions for businesses and governments across the world. And today's session really is not certainly about me or really about Rubicon. It's about three of our city partners, exceptional cities and exceptional people who have agreed to join us for a conversation. And it's a conversation that will be about, obviously, smart cities, resilient cities, cities in the face of COVID-19, technology, and public-private partnerships. So I hope that you get something out of this. We're looking forward to the questions as we move through a brief conversation to kick things off. So we're joined today by three friends of our company, and as I said, three really remarkable public servants. First, we have Kamara Jeffrey, who's Senior Project Manager for Circular Economy and Innovation with Solid Waste Management Services for the City of Toronto, Canada. And I think it is fair to say that is one of the most innovative and descriptive titles I have seen in city government. It speaks volumes to the City of Toronto and its leadership, not just operationally and in terms of safeguarding taxpayer dollars, but also in terms of looking forward and trying to build that more circular future. And I'll kick it to you in a moment after I quickly introduce our other two panelists. Chris Conway, Director of Public Works with the City of Montgomery, one of Rubicon's longest partners. We've been working with Montgomery for, gosh, I think 3 years now, Chris, both in a co-innovation pilot capacity and then later on now in a contracted capacity. It's a great city, a city that certainly has borne the brunt of COVID in a profoundly deep way and has come out the other end of it stronger. And really looking forward to hearing from Chris as well. And then finally, Erica Jacobo, Senior Continuous Improvement Analyst at the City of Spokane. And we're going to talk a lot with Erica today. And I think her title is also really telling. This is a city that has someone in a position focused on continuous improvement. The idea that the city has never gotten to a perfect state in terms of customer service delivery, efficiency, taxpayer savings. And I can say, and my team would say the same thing, she and her colleagues have challenged us. They are challenging us right now to improve our product, to make our product better. They hold us to an incredibly high standard, as they should. And we are grateful not only for that level of transparency, but also for her and her colleagues' patience with us as we continue to build a better product. And it's really important to note that, especially when we talk about public-private partnerships and what I believe makes them work. So with that, Kamara, I'd love for you to kick off, tell people a bit about your role, a bit about the city and your operations. And we could probably weave our first question into this, which is, tell us how you all are doing in the face of COVID. How is the city, both personally and professionally right now?
Great. Thanks very much for that warm welcome, and we're happy to be here. As Michael mentioned, my name is Kamara Jeffrey, and my current role is Senior Project Manager at the City of Toronto. My work is situated within the Solid Waste Management Services Department in a business unit called Circular Economy and Innovation, and this unit really came out of the city's long-term waste management strategy, which sets an aspirational goal of City of Toronto being the first circular city in the province. So that's sort of the context behind our work. And we're really excited about that aspirational goal. So our unit leads that circular economy work through a range of approaches in policy, in our operations. We're looking at infrastructure, we look at community engagement, and we look at innovation pilots and the ways that we can use technology to advance those circular goals. So, the pandemic, as many people know, it hit pretty hard. And in response, the City of Toronto deployed its emergency operations center and pivoted its operations to, ensure that we could continue critical and essential services, and also so that we could ensure that we were directing our resources to our most vulnerable residents. So, for example, our seniors' care homes. And waste collection was actually one of the service delivery areas that was deemed an essential service by our provincial government. So in many respects, our business continued. We, in terms of operational changes, we implemented some distancing measures, for example. We adjusted those to be in alignment with our provincial requirements around safe workplace practices. So, for example, we implemented a process for daily overnight disinfection of all of our waste collection vehicles. We also, we are generally, we're faring pretty well. As you know, the pandemic is ongoing, and, we've been extremely proud of sort of, the resilience and the dedication of all of our frontline workers, and, generally the public service in responding and pivoting to this new reality of the pandemic.
Well, that was great. Thank you so much. Chris, over to you. Brief introduction, and how are things going in Montgomery in the face of COVID? Any big learnings from this experience so far?
Yes, thanks, Michael. Chris Conway. I'm the Director of City Services, Public Works in the City of Montgomery, and solid waste collection, disposal, all of that falls under us. And, in terms of COVID, probably, June, July were the hardest hit times for us. March, April, we were kind of preparing for the worst. We weren't experiencing the worst at that time, but as the pandemic, kind of progressed, I think we saw what other cities had seen before us. So we weren't necessarily taken fully by surprise. We did all of the things that were just mentioned in terms of, safeguarding our fleet, in terms of just cleaning practices and things that, obviously probably should have been doing all along, so it takes a pandemic to bring those things to the forefront. But what we did see is that we had very little exposure on the job. And so even though we're probably the least equipped group to handle it, we have rear loader collection. And so that means 3 guys sit in a truck to go perform the job for a great deal of the day. So there's certainly some social distancing challenges there, but we've almost had no one who was exposed on the job. Most of all of our exposure has been away from the job. And it's really, kind of highlighted the need to carry all of these practices that, nothing goes away just because you go home, and how you interact away from the job. So all of those things kind of came to the forefront for us in terms of contact tracing and relationships outside the job and those sorts of things. So we had to be a lot more in tune to what our employees were doing, both on the job and to some extent away from the job. So, today, knock on wood, we are, since I think I just told somebody, I think our first case was April the 20th here at the City of Montgomery. It was in our sanitation department. And as of yesterday, we had 0 infected employees in all of Public Works. So that has not been the case for that entire stretch of time. We've probably had 15% of our employee body affected by the disease. And thankfully, most of those have now returned to work, if not all at this point. So, again, we look, we certainly haven't taken down our guard, but we look ahead to a similar challenge as we get into the winter months.
Well, let me just say, I know I speak for everyone on the panel. That is a blessing. Thank God that you've turned that corner and reach that milestone, because I know the city was so hard in your department as well. Erica, I'll let you wrap up this session, introduction, and a bit about how COVID has impacted your operation and your city.
Yeah, so thanks, Michael. My name is Erica Jacobo, and as he said, I'm the Senior Continuous Improvement Analyst here at the City of Spokane. And a lot of what my role is I work with multiple departments across the city. I'm actually within the project management office, and anytime we have large software implementations, a lot of times continuous improvement is brought on to make sure that we're not taking old processes, old junky, wasteful processes, and putting that into a new system. And so it's it's a great way to kind of dive deep into what we're doing now and where we want to be in the future. And one of the departments I work with, of course, is solid waste collection here at the city, and we've been taking a lot of strides over the last couple of years to gain efficiency in our operations. With COVID, of course, we've been very lucky here at the City of Spokane, where we've actually had one case throughout the entire city. And so luckily we haven't taken huge hits. We immediately started doing working from home, those of us that could. Of course, Spokane or the solid waste collection department couldn't do that, but there was a lot of different things that we did here within the department in order to implement the social distancing. One of the things that we used to have is a manual time clock that the guys would punch in every morning. So you figure about 40 different guys that are all in line getting ready to punch in on a time clock, and we immediately moved to them utilizing their tablets for the routes that they go on every day. We actually implemented where they were going and doing their time on their tablets so that nobody was standing around within the crew room, and we were able to maintain the social distancing. Everybody comes in one door and leaves out another door within the building. Of course, we're all wearing masks, things like that. And so we were able to implement those things quite immediately when everything started to happen back in March, and it's kept everybody pretty safe. And of course, sanitizing the trucks, things like that has been a big thing just to kind of keep everybody safe. And so far we're doing really well, and we're very lucky in that sense. Here in Spokane, but I think the quick response into making sure that we took the appropriate measures was definitely very helpful.
Well, that was great, Erica. And, there's something, well, you all said something, but you and Chris in particular, it set off the bell for me. My wife and I are looking at schools in New York for when we return back to New York. We're camped out in the mountains right now during COVID. And when you have these, one-on-ones with the admissions office, you have to ask a smart question, right? So they know the parents are dialed in. And so our question is, to these schools, what thing have you changed as a result of COVID that you're going to keep, right? That you realized was, oh my gosh, we should have been doing this all along. And the schools give some very interesting answers, but including we're going to have we're always going to have tents. We're doing tents forever. But to each of you, are there any things that COVID basically forced you to do that now you're saying, my gosh, we should have been doing this all along, and they're going to be a part of your operation moving forward? Anyone who wants to answer that.
I would love to answer this one. The time clock. You have no idea how long we were trying to get the department to buy into the fact that this manual time clock that is not even, you can't even buy parts for it anymore. Literally, the last time one broke, we had to buy a used one on eBay. And the department had a really hard time letting that process go. And now, it's funny because the minute the COVID happened, it was like, okay, no, we have to implement this right now. And it was wonderful. And now that everybody's doing it, they're like, wow, this wasn't so bad. But the coaxing that we were trying to do and trying to gain that buy-in was taking so long. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we should have done this a long time ago. It's like, yeah, I know. But it's really awesome because, stepping into the 21st century is a nice thing. It's a good thing.
we find some inspiration where even these little things that could be silver linings of a horrible time, right?
Right.
Kamara, anything you want to add from your cities?
Yeah, I'd say, from an organizational standpoint, the pandemic has really accelerated our shift to digitize our public services. So, as someone mentioned earlier, many of our staff are working from home, but also like looking at all areas of business in terms of service delivery and how we can sort of maximize the resources we have and streamline our service delivery. So we're doing that through it's called Modern TO. And it was really, given an injection during the beginning of COVID because of the need to sort of intensify those efforts to modernize and digitize service delivery. And, we see this Modern TO initiative towards digitization as not only an opportunity to streamline service delivery, but to deliver on social benefits. So we're really trying to look at creative ways to deliver on some of those objectives that we have that are social in nature.
We're going to come back to that, this notion of equity, social contract between the government and the taxpayer. I think that's super important. Chris, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I don't know if it would be under the context of one particular item that is here to stay, but it has certainly changed our outlook on things like remote and telework. Obviously, you can't do that with solid waste personnel and that sort of thing, but just the constant need to think that all of your support personnel had to be co-located in the same proximity. This is just, with the use of technology, has shown us that, there are really no limits to how we can arrange that type of an, office space, or whether it be remote, telework from home, utilizing a different building within, our complex or whatever it is, just to, make these types of things work. So I think getting comfortable with that was something that's here to stay. It's not going to go back tomorrow to say, well, we're no longer comfortable with that. The COVID is gone. Let's throw that out the window. A significant reduction in kind of silo mentality in terms of, well, we've got the solid waste department that does a particular job, or we have the street maintenance department that does a particular job. As our force was, reduced, just by the COVID or, quarantine or whatever the case may be, the need to have those parts move around and be interchangeable to some extent. So that's, it doesn't really matter what color shirt you have on today, you may be wearing a different color tomorrow. So, just kind of that camaraderie of let's all pitch in to get the most important job done for the day, and see what those things are. And then I think the one thing that's, hopefully never going away is just that appreciation of the frontline worker, right? So all of our guys have had kind of, once or twice a year, you celebrate that guy and talk about what a great job they do. And this has been day after day after day, with people calling in and saying, man, I just can't thank enough the job that solid waste is doing. My collection guys are the greatest, and we've put more garbage out. We've left bags by the bin. We've done all the things that you shouldn't do, and they haven't, blinked an eye. They've just gotten it done. And so to me, that's probably something that obviously shouldn't go away, and I don't think it will go away for a long time in terms of recognition of just how important that job is.
It's inspiring. I mean, all of your answers, there's so many themes that come out of them, right? There's the notion of digitization and innovation, and it's everything from a time clock, right, to moving away from a time clock to fully digitizing services. And then, Chris, you remind us of the human element, right? The frontline worker. And when you and I a webcast a few months ago, we spent a lot of time talking about, we at Rubicon call our hauler heroes. And this all matters. And now I'll try to shift us more into the core content of this session, right? This notion of using your fleets, right? And you all oversee fleets in some way, using your government fleets to unlock the promise of a smart city. And you remind me, Chris, that, you know, a fleet isn't just a truck. It's the man or woman who is operating that truck and the man or woman who is maybe managing that fleet as well. So a fleet is not a faceless thing. There is more to it than that, and it's so important. And Kamara, you remind me as well the promise of equity, and that anything that we as the private sector aspire to do in the smart city space must have an eye towards that promise of equitable public service provision. All zip codes are treated equally. It doesn't matter your income level or if you're on the right side of the proverbial track or not. And I think particularly in the private sector, we need to be so mindful of that. So let's jump into the theme a bit, right? We're at Smart Cities Connect. The term smart city has been out there, I don't know, 15, 20 plus years now. Our board member, Steve Goldsmith, was an early person in defining that term. And, you know, he and I often talk about it. I say, you know, are we moving beyond the term smart city now? Are we really aspiring to be resilient cities? Are we aspiring to be proactive cities? And our vision for a smart city is a city that is proactive. It anticipates the need of the citizen before he or she, the taxpayer, calls you folks about a given issue. It's a digital city, secondly, and you all hit on that in some way. And finally, it's a city that is driven by data, and that the decision makings are born from data, not from politics, and that ultimately leads to better outcomes for folks. So that's the promise we think you know, cities should be trying to fulfill. But I'm curious, how do you think about it from your perch leading your departments, and how does your broader city leadership think about what a smart city should be, or a resilient city? Don't all jump in at once here. Mary, do you want to take that one? Please, Erica, go ahead.
Okay. Well, you know, for me, here at the city, you know, when I was brought on, you know, it's going on about 4 years ago, just the fact that, you know, the city is recognizing, okay, we need to do things differently. You know, one of the things that COVID has done too is realizing how many services we do in person and how we need to make those digital as well. And so like online payment processing for, you know, permits, licenses, things like that has been a big topic here. And we've been reaching out to other cities like Salt Lake City, the city of Boise, people that are already doing this. And, you know, when you think about it, it's like, wow, we could have been doing this so long ago. And there's been all these different conversations. And so it's kind of a blessing in disguise even still. But that's a lot of, you know, what we're constantly doing. I think what the city was trying to do with continuous improvement and our project management office is trying to get ahead and stop reacting to things and being more proactive. And so we're constantly trying to do that. But, you know, how fast we're able to do it sometimes is a challenge, of course. It's Kamara, did you want to step in there?
Yeah, sure. You know, I agree. I think, you know, the speed of digitization and modernization is certainly a challenge, and it's a big question mark. I think that, you know, as governments, you know, as was mentioned before, our work isn't just about leveraging technology for efficiencies and for, you know, saving money. It's also about enhancing those public benefits. So, for example, one of the initiatives that we had spearheaded during the pandemic was, as a city, we supported the provision of mobile Wi-Fi trucks to help mitigate against the digital divide in terms of equitable access across the city for residents. But I think more specifically to, you know, looking at our fleets, it's been an interesting journey. I think at Solid Waste Management Services, we've always been interested in sort of the shift towards digitization and smart cities and modernization. I think that we often take signals from what are our biggest challenges. One of our biggest challenges over the years has been contamination in our recycling stream. So in order to respond to that, our division created a mobile phone app that allows our staff to record those instances of contamination using photos from the phone, using GPS location, and being able to scan the bin barcodes so that information could be uploaded into a central database. So things like that. But again, the sort of speed and the extent of these transformations are still, something that we're grappling with.
Sure, it's incremental. Understood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chris, over to you. And I know that some of the work we did with you all early on was having your trucks that were out, obviously doing their core service of picking up the waste, the recycling, but also trying to identify quality of life issues in the community. I think that starts to get us towards this broader notion of using these fleets to unlock broader smart city potential as well.
Yeah, so, you talked about how, we started with being driven by data and making decisions based on the data that we receive. But what I really see that we've done is we're being driven by, an increased accountability to our customer, right? So, whereas we've always had these proactive measures in place to try and take care of things before they became an issue, just the simple idea that a waste collection vehicle is going to traverse the street in my city 3 times a week, each mile, so there's unlimited things that they're going to see that other departments are supposed to see, but just physically cannot. And so, again, we partnered with you guys, and we had a pothole recognition pilot, and that has gone kind of exceptionally well in terms of teaching that truck when we have that, so that we can then automatically deploy a resource that goes and takes care of that before anyone ever even has to call a 311. We just kind of create that ourselves. And one of the things that I think that I'm certainly going to be working towards, as we have fallen short, during COVID, when we were, our fleet was down, or our personnel was down, or whatever those issues were, as we've fallen short, we really want people to know exactly when we have fallen short, and we want them to know why we fell short. So I think that's another component that, kind of that reverse 311 to interact with the customer that says, hey, we weren't able to get your bulk and brush pickup on its scheduled day for X, Y, and Z reason, and you can expect that service to occur on a given day, and avoid all of those calls about, hey, you forgot me, you don't take care of me, and get into all those sorts of things. But being upfront, being accountable, and owning up to where we're obviously doing our best. Nothing was ever done purposefully, but it's just the nature of the business. And so as we move out of something like this, we're still going to have those shortcomings and still have those things go on, but we certainly want to own up to that and make sure that we were being proactive in that.
I love that answer, because, all of us who have worked in or work in government obviously know 311, right? And that was the moment of the responsive city, right? How quickly could you respond to a 311 call? And the notion that, a citizen called and someone just answered was such a big deal. But here we are now, about 20 years later, and the expectation is higher, right? So the government's actually, you guys, right? You're going to the citizen before they contact you. A question on the back of that, I guess for everyone, but perhaps starting with you, Chris. So you just articulated what our vision is from our perch in the private sector. But we are not the ones toiling away as you are under constrained budgets and with the realities of 50,000 other things to do. When you have your solid waste truck out, picking up the trash, doing its daily route, and then also identifying a pothole in the example in Montgomery, that is putting some additional work on someone else's plate within the city. What advice do you have to the other, our audience, other city officials? How do you get buy-in internally for this smart solution that frankly expedites work for your colleagues in some cases? Or was that not an issue?
So far, Michael, it really hasn't been an issue for us because really the work was always there, right? But this just, like you talk about a data-driven decision, this gives us a piece of data that is even beyond a citizen complaint, because a citizen complaint is guided by what they believe to be a road hazard or a pothole or something that they deem needs to be addressed. Whereas we're kind of taking that out of the equation with the artificial intelligence and the recognition that it has that basically sets a standard for what that pothole is, what that issue is, and when and how that needs to be addressed. So for us, instead of me saying, oh, I got a complaint about a pothole at 321 Oak Street, and then going out there and saying, well, that's not a pothole at all. Now I have, not only the data that came from the truck, a picture from the truck, all of those things that come into play that I wasn't getting before. So it's really probably streamlined the way we would do business in that realm. So no complaints about the quote unquote added work. It's just been seen as, hey, this helps me out a good deal. I don't have to do as much reconnaissance. I can feel comfortable about deploying that asset, and everything's good. And no complaint from the citizen at the same time. So I don't even have to bother with that. So
that's helpful, isn't it? Erica, Kamara, do you have anything that you want to add on that point? Or?
So I have something to add. So one of the things that we've utilized with our drivers is because obviously they drive all around the city throughout 5-6 days a week. And so they have a lot of, eyes out on what's going on. And so prior to when we got the Rubicon tablets, anytime they'd run into an abandoned vehicle, they would a lot of times fill out like a carbon copy piece of paper that would then be inter-office mailed downtown to code enforcement. That way they knew where the location of the abandoned vehicle was. It was a lot of paperwork, and it was constant because there's abandoned vehicles all over the city. And now we actually utilize the tablets to document that. And so it was a process we were already doing as far as like letting code enforcement know where we'd find these abandoned vehicles. But now we're able to just generate a report from all the different locations that the drivers have seen these abandoned vehicles and just hand that over to code enforcement. So it's really sped up that process. It's taking out all of the manual paperwork that went along with it. And then it's just kind of left in code enforcement's court, as far as their long list of what they need to investigate. But that's been a huge benefit for us because we're not dealing with the interoffice mail and whatnot. And just the paperwork that you're having to then just duplicate that effort into, generating that list that the guys have come up with.
These are such good examples: abandoned cars, potholes, real things that, contribute to a poor quality of life. Kamara, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just a few, additions to those, themes that were brought up around, increased accountability of government and the need, as Chris mentioned, to, prioritize the most important job of the day. So, when COVID hit, our staff many of our policy staff was redeployed to support essential services, and we stopped for example, our yard waste collection so that we could prioritize our 3 streams of garbage, recycling, and organics collection. And, so very, very much our approach to technology and technology innovation is shaped by the need to provide those essential services. And we also really view pilot testing as a way to, explore how those technologies can potentially improve our efficiencies and our operations in the future. So we actually partnered with Rubicon as well for a pilot test that really, in a similar way, took a circular economy lens to our assets, in this case, our collection trucks, to see how we could utilize them more completely and support our service delivery of collecting those three essential streams. So it was really interesting. It was a really cool project because it involved the automated reporting of bin overflow. So we know that, we have a really a pay-as-you-throw 4-bin size system in Toronto for garbage collection. And we know that sometimes customers overflow their bins rather than purchasing or paying for upsizing their bin. And so we thought that this would be an interesting project. And, we typically, what we do is we deploy additional staff out into the field to record not just overfilled bins, but contamination, which I mentioned is a huge problem in our system and incurs a huge cost. So with this pilot test, we were able to use Rubicon's technology to identify overflow in an automated way and in a way that didn't impede our operations. So, it really gave us some interesting insight into how smart technology could be potentially used to potentially, communicate to our residents about bin overflow or even detect potentially contamination issues to the extent that the technology could see those or detect those contaminated items. So, it was a really interesting use of technology to address some of the issues that we're currently dealing with.
Our partnership with you in the City of Toronto has truly challenged us in a very good way for so many reasons. But one is your city's profound and I would say very rightful commitment to privacy and to data ownership. And it has forced us to think about our policies and ensure that what we're building is truly in the public interest as well as, of course, our own. But I love that. I love all of these projects, but that one in particular, it hits a number of vectors, right? I would always say it's this part of the bin, the little triangle that's open, that's lost revenue for the city, right? So there is an economic case for why you need to identify those bins, but also there's the contamination element. And so there's also this sustainability or environmental angle to it. In my mind, kind of a double bottom line win, hopefully for you all. I know when we were briefing before, I said, we'll move from this point, we'll talk, again about technology, but I want to actually flip it a little bit, just because your answers on this I thought were so insightful. These are 3 real world examples that regular people can understand. Overflowing bins, abandoned cars, potholes. How do you measure ROI? And I don't mean just relative to those projects and to us as a partner, but in general, when you are partnering with the private sector, whether it's in a pilot capacity or a paid capacity or some hybrid of the two, how do you determine if you get what you're paying for or the time that you're investing in? What are your metrics for success?
So I'll start, Michael. For us, Rubicon came about to us, and I'll just use you as the premier example since that's what we're talking about. It came about to us as a solution that we really didn't even realize we needed. It wasn't as if we were out there searching for some, great and wonderful thing. It was just an idea that was presented to us that said, you know what, in terms of being a sustainable city, in terms of succession planning, in terms of how can we really get a handle on what our service is and what our capabilities are, we need to take this step. And so, we take a step with a pilot, which was perfect for us because, again, we didn't even realize that we would need something like this. And so it was a tough sell. It was one of those conversations that says, hey, I know we're not experiencing a problem. Our solid waste division is the #1 customer service rated department in the entire city and has been for the last 20 years. So what is our need to improve on something like that? But it really opened up something that's kind of unheard of in government, and that's, not accepting good enough, right? So we'd always been good enough, but it allowed us to say, is it possible now that we might get this exactly right and actually be perfect? What would it take for us to be perfect? And so you between good enough and perfect, you realize, I'm never going to be on the end of perfection, but if I can start moving in that direction, we start to get beyond good enough and start capturing excellence. So we go from good enough to, hey, this is even better. This is now excellent, and we're getting closer and closer to perfecting the process. So that's just been our experiences. We take in technology, not knowing really that we could use it in such a way that we did. I mean, again, as it was presented to us, a lot of these things were never even contemplated, Michael. I mean, we didn't know. We kind of had a broad concept of a roaming data center, but then that clicks off light bulbs all across our department saying, well, if that's going to be the case, can I get a little piece of this? Can we get in on this? And so that's kind of been Montgomery's experience anyway.
That's great. You and Erica should, have a conversation, continue with them. That's what you were just talking about. Erica?
So, with us, prior to us bringing Rubicon as our route management, and of course, we were doing paper routes. And so the amount of manual work that was done to get those paper routes all together, get those out to the drivers would document, if there was extra bags or if something was contaminated, all of the different extra charges that, if it's blocked, things like that, they would document on, paper. And then that would, again, come back to, the offices. It would have to be then routed downtown to where the clerks are. And so there was always this very long delay as far as, what are these exceptions that we're charging for? And often, when we would be charging for like an extra bag or, any of that extra garbage, or if it was contaminated, we had no proof of it necessarily. Obviously we trust what the drivers are documenting, but there was no pictures, no nothing. And so what the tablet has really allowed us to do is document those things. And a lot of the credits that we were having to provide back to people that would just argue saying, no, I didn't have extra trash, or I didn't put anything in the recycling bin to contaminate it. Now we have pictures that we can actually email to the customer and say, well, isn't this your bin, or this is in front of your house? And it's actually decreased the number of credits that we're giving back to, those charges that, we were right to charge towards the account, all of that extra work that the driver's having to do. And so it's been a huge bonus for us, is being able to get rid of that, of just having to give all of those credits back to the customer, because we were losing revenue in that sense. Another thing that we've noticed is, so with miscollections, we expected that the calls would go down, and they haven't necessarily gone down as far as we expected. Although the miscollections, what's happening is just the perception of our citizens is that, they expect that their garbage to be picked up at a certain time every day. And, things happen, trucks break down, and we have to the driver has to move to another truck. So it may delay the route a little bit longer. And so he's not in that area, or maybe perhaps there's there's construction in one area, and so he's having to kind of take a different route to get to certain houses, things like that. And so the perception of the citizen, if it's not happening at the exact same time every day, then something might be wrong. And so they may call early in the day, assuming that the driver has missed their stop, their bin. And so what we really want to do is look towards the future and how can we be really transparent with the citizens as far as like, okay, you can expect your garbage to be picked up at this time, or where they can go and check online and say, okay, have they been in my area yet? No. Okay. Have that somewhat of a time delay for safety for drivers, but try to utilize the Rubicon software and the technology into how can we make this more visible to our citizens so they're not having to call in and say, okay, my driver hasn't been by this, I think it's a miscollection. Well, they can actually go online and say, oh, okay, they haven't been in my area yet, so I can expect them at this time. Or perhaps too, if there's big delays that we know are happening because, earlier in September, we had all the smoke coming up in our area from California and Oregon, and it caused for hazardous conditions. And we had to actually stop all rear load routes. Anybody that had to get out of the truck, we had to stop routes until the levels got down to, a more healthier quality. And it was really hard to let the citizens know about that. And so how can we utilize maybe texting or things like that where we can let the citizens know, okay, this is an emergency situation. You can expect your garbage to be, we know that this is happening. It's got to be delayed a couple of days, really trying to think about how we can pull the technology that we're using now and then further be transparent with our citizens on what we're actually doing on a day-to-day basis.
Well, that's great. And Kamara, I'm going to give you a free pass on this last question because I see that we're at time and we're going to move to Q&A in a moment. But in all of your responses throughout this, particularly when we talked about the different partnerships that you had, and Erica and Chris, which you just outlined, you're talking about smart city innovations taking place on the back of a garbage truck. And I think for our audience, and we'll see what the questions are that flow in, that's not intuitive, right? The notion of the smart city is this kind of ethereal thing that's 20 years away, and it's going to have all this massive new technology that has to be constructed and permitted and will cost gobs and gobs of money. And I think if there's one takeaway I'd love for the audience to have, and this is apart from Rubicon specifically, is that it doesn't have to be that complicated. A smart city identifies potholes, it identifies abandoned cars, it identifies overflowing bins. It does it with existing assets that hopefully help you save some money and get that buy-in internally that each of you have spoken about a bit more easily. So thank you all for talking with me, chatting with me from various places across the continent. And let's kick it over now to some Q&A from the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.